tissue somewhere. Hey, welcome back. It's good to see you again. How are you doing today? Personally speaking, I'm not doing that hot. I'm actually sick right now. That's right, your old pal Jackie Boy has got the sniffles. I know the joke about film nerds is that we're all pretentious mouth breathers, but my nose these past couple days have been so stuffed that I actually have to breathe through my mouth. So the prophecy has been fulfilled, I guess. It does kind of suck being sick, but thankfully it's not COVID. And the good news is that I've gotten some time now to catch up on some things I've been meaning to watch. I've been rewatching Breaking Bad. I've been going through Kieslowski's Color Trilogy again, which is fantastic. And also, I've gotten to see what I think might be my favorite film of 2022 so far, and that's Funny Pages. I got to catch this movie a little bit before I got sick at the Angelica Film Center, and it's a film directed by Owen Kline and released by A24 in tandem with Alara Pictures. Initially, my main interest in seeing this film came from the fact that the Safdie brothers are actually listed as producers on this film, and I'm a diehard for them. I'm always going to want to check out whatever they do. I'm like a sheep at like a petting zoo where like they come around and feed me and I just lick every last bit of oat that's on their hands. And while coming away from this, I definitely felt their presence through certain trademarks and stylistic decisions. I think Owen Kline is who I came out of the theater most impressed with. Owen started his career at a very young age for films like The Anniversary Party and The Squid and the Whale, before taking a brief hiatus from filmmaking to become a cartoonist in New York. It's very clear that he has a deep love for comics, but I think the film also serves as a bit of an allegory for his relationship with filmmaking. Funny Pages is about Robert, a precocious high school dropout who wants to be a cartoonist and will do anything to get into the business. He decides to drop out of high school, move out of his parents' cushy middle-class home, and moves into a disgusting sub-basement in Trenton to solely focus on his craft. He picks up a second job as a typist for a paralegal, where he meets Wallace, a former assistant colorist at a successful comic publisher, who seems to be, in so many words, a little off. To me, this film is kind of like if you threw American Splendor, Frownland, and maybe like a dash of Napoleon Dynamite all into a blender, mixed it all around, and then served it with one of those really thick, like, milkshake straws. Does this analogy make any sense? The film has a pretty loose plot where we get to kind of swim around in this gritty world that the filmmakers created, but I think that there are maybe 4 main ideas that get brought up throughout the runtime, or at least 4 ideas that got me thinking while it was going. So, watch this funny man break down Funny Pages. Maybe I should cut that.
Well, guess I'm off to my hour-long bus ride back home.
Hey, break a leg at the trial.
Even though I live 40 minutes away in Trenton and the bus route is absurd.
I live over by the Trenton Monument. Do you want a lift? Okay, cool.
As artists, we all want to make a living with what we do. And if we had it our way, we would just stay inside and create all day. And then at the end of the week, a check would come in the mail. And for some artists, maybe that wish came true, but that reality is really only afforded to maybe less than 1% of creators in the world. So, for the rest of us, we wind up having to rely on others to help us progress our careers forward. Robert is someone who is doing everything he can to focus solely on his craft and pushes away all other responsibilities as distractions. The only reason he gets a second job is because working at a comic book store isn't enough to support his passion. When Wallace shows up and is revealed to be a former employee at Image Comics, his ears immediately perk up. Meeting Wallace is the first time that Robert's actually met someone who has been able to make a living in the field that he so desperately wants to be a part of, and he clings onto that connection despite the fact that Wallace is kind of a sketchy guy. Not only that, but Wallace also actively degrades all of Robert's work, which, when you're a young artist and you're looking for input and feedback on how to improve, is exactly what you want sometimes. So yes, Robert is using Wallace's status, or former status, to have an in with the industry, but the same also goes vice versa. I mean, Wallace is clearly an unstable guy who we're introduced to as he's being actively investigated for an assault charge. The only reason he even tolerates Robert is because he's just impressionable enough to do what he says, whether that's give him rides around town or overcharge him for a drawing lesson, or even antagonize a local pharmacist at the Rite Aid. Wallace sees Robert's hunger and uses it to make him do things that could actively put him in a bad situation, but Robert is going to do it regardless because, according to him, Wallace is his ticket out. I appreciate that the film doesn't romanticize this relationship as anything other than transactional, which is what it is. I mean, in my own career, I've sent so many query letters and blind emails and LinkedIn requests just to try and get one iota closer to what I want to be, which is a professional filmmaker. But at the end of the day, I know that's only to service my own dream. At the same time, I know when someone is using my hunger and uses it for their own gain. I'm a little bit older than Robert now, so I kind of have the wisdom to be able to tell when I'm being used these days. But when I was younger, I couldn't really tell the difference. And I appreciate the film's depiction of that confusion that maybe some of us felt when we were younger. But then there's the question of, why doesn't Robert just go to art school? I mean, his parents are willing to pay for it. They don't even ask for good grades. He's clearly talented enough, and surely he'd be in an environment where he can thrive, right? Well, this leads to theme number 2.
Suffer again.
I don't understand how that works.
You know, that's the stupidest idea I've ever heard. Right there, right there. You know what you get with it? Oh, do you know what you get with a GED? You know what kind of job you would get?
What?
A gas station.
I'd love to work in a gas station.
Would you like to work in the dishwasher?
Yeah.
You want to work back there?
There's no reason to be so condescending towards people who work those kinds of jobs.
He's not being condescending. You can't get a job as a dishwasher. Do you know what time they wake up in the morning?
5 a.m., 4:45 probably.
It doesn't matter anyway. How is that going to look on your application?
I don't give a shit.
At the beginning of the film, Robert is living with his parents in Princeton, New Jersey, and attending a decent public school. On the surface, his existence is that of a comfortable, upper-middle-class kid. And while privilege is something that he's no stranger to, it's something that he wants to shed from his origin story. He drops out of high school halfway through his senior year, buys a beat-up car from his old boss, and buys the cheapest apartment he can find in Trenton, New Jersey. I'm not from New Jersey, so I looked up the average cost of real estate in both cities, and it's clear that Princeton is one of the more wealthy parts of New Jersey, while Trenton is considered below average for the state. And when it comes to the apartment that Robert gets in Trenton, I think this is where the influence of the Safdies is felt the heaviest, other than maybe a few key casting choices. The apartment that Robert moves to is, for lack of a better word, a shithole. It's essentially a boiler room with a couple of beds in it, and the tenants that inhabit it are equally as unflattering. The fish tank is completely filled with algae, it's always hot, Robert has to share a bedroom with a complete stranger, and he needs to be back before midnight, otherwise he'll be locked out. On top of all this, the landlord says that no one can know that he lives there, meaning that there's something definitely illegal going on in this place. But none of this really phases Robert. In fact, he's stoked about this. And this is because this is his first adult decision and his first chance to rebrand himself as a bohemian outsider. In the world of art and celebrity, an audience oftentimes becomes attached to an artist's genesis, and one of the most common origin stories you'll see is that of the rags to riches tale. Everybody wants to say they got it out of the mud, and that despite the hardship and adversity, they've managed to succeed with a career in the arts as well as thousands of fans. To us, it makes the results of their hard work feel earned, and that if you have just enough pure talent, you can get out of any hard situation. For a quick example, let's take a look at Billie Eilish. She was a massively talented teenager from California who made songs in her bedroom with her brother. She burst onto the scene and became one of the biggest stars in the world. However, as she was gaining notoriety, Many of her detractors said her success came from her family, namely her parents, who are somewhat affluent in the entertainment spheres. Her and her brother worked very hard for their success, but haters will chalk it up to just a case of nepotism. Now, to be clear, nepotism is a real thing that upcoming artists will use to get a foothold into their industry. I mean, Owen Kline is the son of an Oscar-winning actor, but in my eyes, if the art is good enough, it speaks for itself. Despite this, I think Robert would disagree with this sentiment, though. I mean, he lies to Wallace about his living conditions, and he constantly turns down his parents' offers to help him out or do nice things for him. On a quick side tangent, I do think it's funny that A24 within the same month put out this film, as well as Bodies, 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 as both films do touch on the shame of being wealthy, as well as a character who denies that they have affluent parents.
Your parents are upper middle class.
No, they're not.
Jordan, they are. They teach at a university.
It's public.
God, I have such a huge crush on Rachel Sennett. Anyway, so Robert is trying to shed his sheltered teenage life, but it takes more than just a story to become a successful artist, right? What about his actual comics? Theme number 3.
You're not threatened by me or something now that I'm drawing cartoonier looking comics.
Miles, if I'm being honest, I think they show promise, but...
I asked you a question.
No, I'm certainly not threatened by you drawing like me. Yeah, I'm flattered, but if Katana were alive, he'd call it a Hajj. A half-assed job, because it is.
Throughout this whole story, Robert's best friend is another 17-year-old named Miles, who is also a cartoonist. Miles is a soft-spoken, long-haired teenager who shares a lot of the same interests as Robert, but doesn't seem to have any of the same insecurities. He's essentially a punching bag for Robert, which makes you feel kind of bad for him. Miles makes his comics on little folded pieces of paper and gives them to Robert for advice, and Robert just kind of completely shits on them. He says they're derivative, he says his form is all over the place, and that no one wants to buy them. And Wallace also says the same thing, but Miles retaliates and says that despite the fact that he failed with soul. And this made me think a little bit. Robert and Miles clearly view their crafts differently. I think Robert is more focused on structure and technique and views the process as more of a science, while Miles is more focused on having fun and enjoying the process. They both love the funnies a lot, and the film relishes on opportunities for them to talk about comics, with references such as Betty Boop and Garfield and Archie. But their differences in approach made me think about artists that I've known and their different emphases on their craft. Some kids I went to film school with wanted to make these grand, life-altering technical masterpieces where they put thousands and thousands of their own money into creating their films. And other kids just wanted to make funny little sketches for their friends. And I kind of slid up and down that scale too. I mean, my thesis film, I put almost 2 years into creating, and I put everything I had into telling this story that I really thought needed to be told. But my editing final in my first year of college was this.
This is a dog. 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 This is a dog.
I mean, I got a good grade. At the end of the day, Robert and Miles do create these Crumb-style cartoons with gross-out humor and exaggerated stereotypes, but the principles that they set out for themselves produce an interesting discussion. I think it's easy to think that both of them sit at opposite ends of the table when it comes to their process for creating comics, but I think both ideologies are important when thinking about creating. You can make this impeccably crafted masterpiece that has no technical flaws, but winds up feeling kind of hollow inside, or you can create absolute dookie and have the best time making it. You know, it's all about balance. I think this perspective comes with experience and in some cases age, which I don't believe Robert has yet.
Because you love me.
Look, obviously you need to hear this because I don't think currently you're able to think outside your own critical box. You're already at a professional level of drawing for what you want to do. You need to package this up, put it in an envelope, send it off to Mad Magazine. I'm serious. College is a pinheaded proposition.
I don't know what to tell you, man. I have to go to college. I can't not go to college.
And what happens if you come out ruined, which is what's gonna happen, yeah?
Not going is it's not an option.
Okay, fair enough. No judge.
Oh my God, I'm so stuffed. Pause. I'm sure we've all heard this time and time again, but when you're young, it's easy to think that you're indestructible. I know that when I was a lot younger, I took on more things than I could handle because I wanted to be seen as an adult. I think Robert is just a kid who wants to prove himself after his art teacher died and make good on the potential that he showed. He's an unlikable protagonist that is definitely an asshole to everybody around him, but in my eyes, that's because he holds himself to such a high standard. And most of all, Robert wants to do everything on his own terms. If he wants to drop out of school and get his shitty apartment, he's going to do that. If he wants to ask a probable felon for a drawing lesson, he's going to give it everything he's got. But you can only put so much on yourself as a kid, which is what Robert is, a kid. The weight of all these self-ascribed pressures crashed down around him on a Christmas morning. The night before, his apartment becomes too much to bear. His best friend is heavily injured in an accident. His parents' house is completely destroyed, and Wallace literally beats the shit out of him in a wild goose chase. Everything Robert has tried to build has crumbled around him. And in the end, he goes to the one place he feels safe, the comic book store. He lifts the gate, lets himself in, and just sits at the counter, probably thinking to himself, well, there's nothing funny about this. Yep, another video in the bag. Swish. I really did love this movie a lot, and I think that Owen Kline has proved himself to be an extremely promising director. As I mentioned, I am a Safdie Brothers stan, and I've loved almost all of their output, but I think this is the first Elara Pictures feature that I can comprehensively compare to my own life. Because listen, I'm not losing 30K betting on a rock, you know? I'm not built that different. That's you, but that's not me. I don't think it's quite as flawless as other Elara features, but it's for sure got the grit and the spunk that is in line with the company's other output, as well as some outstanding casting. Shout out to Jennifer Venditti for collecting all these cartoony looking faces to create this. It was such a joy to see some familiar faces as well as some new unheard ofs. That's pretty much it. Thank you all so much for watching. Take care of yourselves. And remember, everything is free on Amazon if you say that it's broken.